So welcome to the Nordics. It's weird here. That's something we love saying. So I'm from Kyrö Distillery company. We are a fairly young craft distillery founded in 2012, but started operations in 2014. And our whole idea was to make everything we do out of rye. Why rye? Because we in Finland, we love rye. We grow up on it. We eat rye bread, rye porridge, rye everything. And when we were starting out, and we got the idea that we should be the first one to make like real spirits from Finland out of rye, we got asked to send some pictures for a up and coming Nordic whiskey book, and we had nothing. We didn't have a distillery, no stills. There's no MGP to source liquid from in the Nordics, so like we had nothing. So we thought that we need to send in something that will show three things: the team, rye, and naked ambition. And we ended up with a very literal put together of those three things. And this is the founding team, including myself, but you'll never know who I am there. Corporate secrets. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Nordics. And when we talk about the Nordics, there's a couple of definitions we can go to. Some people think the Nordics are the same as Scandinavia. It's not quite. We're not invited into that club as Finland. It's Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland. And also now it's sort of common to these times to also include the Baltic states when talking about Nordics. And especially I think it's relevant for spirits since we're such a tied-in place. But I'm going to still focus on the more traditional definition of Nordics, including Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, and then a couple of interesting places like the Faroe Islands. So when I was saying that what we like is regulating our alcohol, well, I wasn't kidding. I'm gonna put some numbers on there right off. We are a fairly small collection of countries. We're pretty wealthy, but then again, there's a number of let's say hurdles when coming in, and one of the hurdles is the monopoly column. So most of our countries would have a retail monopoly for selling alcohol. Just as a background, for Finland, until 1995, all importation, production, distribution, and sales of alcohol was just one government-owned monopoly. Now it's a bit more free, but still the retail is controlled by the governments, as it is in Sweden and Norway. And as a leftover, weirdly enough, and hi to any Nordic colleagues out there, we've got a collection of old government-owned big producers that have now either been sold off or stock market listed, depending on the country. And then Denmark is just on its own. But if you then look at the marketing, it presents another hard set of regulations that you have to deal with. And the final one is the tax. And always when we come to the taxes, it's good to remind you all that if you look at it from outside Europe, I'd say you'd be pretty stupid to say that, okay, well, I'm just going to start selling to Europe. It's really not one country. Also the same like when you come to the Nordics, it's good to remember that Germany has a nice alcohol tax of I think 13 euros and 3 cents for a liter of ethanol, and for us it's 48.8, and for Norwegians it's 80 euros, 80 cents per liter of ethanol. So if you're just gonna do, like, I'll just do one European pricing, and then you might be rudely surprised when you come into one of the monopoly stores up in the Nordics. So I want to talk about sort of four key points that I view coming from inside the market to be crucial if you want to think about how you reach the end customer where we are. And those points are culture, marketing, travel, retail, and monopolies. And you got to know how to play all four in order to make it. You might notice that on-trade isn't specifically here as its own thing. Especially we in Finland, we've traditionally been a a meat, potatoes, and a vodka people. Very simple. The bar culture, if I'm totally fair, isn't all that when it comes to craft spirits. There are fantastic bars. There are incredible bar teams. But if you look at the split, classic 80-20 between off-trade, on-trade, it really is that in the Nordics. And if you talk about high-grade, high-price alcohol, it's the view out there in bars is not that good. But having said that, things have started to change, let's say, in the last 4 years, where, for instance, we see our market share or our split in the channels in Finland being roughly equal, 50-50 on-trade to off-trade. But I can tell you that's taken an incredible reach through PR that has covered the whole country in order to get there. So we're still a small business, but for some reason we're already in the status where if something in related to spirits happens in Finland, we're the first ones usually interviewed, and they don't go to the big government-owned company, and that should tell you something about the sort of the poolside help we're getting from the press. So on-trade is definitely a factor, but in order to really succeed, like in a business sense in the Nordics, I wouldn't spend too much time on the on-trade. So first about the culture. The culture is really varied across even the Nordic countries, but there are also a lot of similarities. We like our work-life balance. We like our urban-rural balance. And we like a balanced life all in all. So it's not definitely as driven or high-flying, let's say, as London or as gritty and cultural as Berlin. But if you go around, especially the capitals like Copenhagen, Helsinki, Stockholm, they all have their own vibe, and it's a nice, vibrant scene. But you'll find a lot of opportunities elsewhere too. There's a big skiing holiday scene. There's a lot of camping, even glamping nowadays, and lots of third spaces that you might want to engage to find your consumer, depending on what your spirits brand is. And also, it's worth remembering that when you look across the Nordics, it's good to start treating them as their own countries rather than a collective. Where we in Finland, we like to say as we're a young nation compared to especially Sweden and Denmark, who are very old. Even sometimes in the history dominant nations, we like to say that we love and appreciate everything that the Swedes do, and they have heard about us. So that's sort of the balance of cultures between Finland and Sweden, for instance. So for us, coming from the Nordics, coming from Finland, we get no free points in Sweden. Actually, it might be the other way around. So when you're coming from outside, worth remembering that treat them all as their own things. And the next one, I got asked whether this slide is a mistake. It's not. This is my marketing slide. So the law regulating spirits in Finland starts with the words, the marketing of hard alcohol is prohibited. So, okay, why have I hired a marketing director then, you might ask. But there's things you can do still that will go around it. You can find your own PR slots. You can do some sort of ATL or brand marketing that takes you around that requirement. Or you can do it a bit like we do and market your company image. You can market your company, weirdly enough, but you can't market your hard spirits products. Who draws the line? It's the regulator. Where do they draw it? It's a case-by-case thing. So you might get burned now and then, and you might lose, or your distributor might lose your license, but it's a thing you learn to navigate. And in Sweden, it's very similar. In Norway, it's even more tough. So it's a hard place to come to if you don't have some sort of a global reach for your brand that'll make it through anyway through some other channels, by bars or by let's say social media and other forms of media. So in that sense, like in order to build a brand, you might be forced to go into the on-trade heavily, but as I said, it's also not a great space to play. And at this point, if this presentation is starting to sound like a don't come to Nordics presentation, it's really not. But I'm just trying to make you aware of some of the idiosyncrasies that you'll have to face there. Talking about channels where to introduce your products, one thing you might consider is travel retail. So we're known, of course, you have your airports and your typical stuff, but we're known for our very big presence of cruise ship traffic. And the cruise ships, if you looked at the tax column, the cruise ships, weirdly enough, can sell tax-free just as long as they're out on the sea for at least 23 hours. So a lot of people will go to the cruise ships and buy their booze tax-free. And that's a channel that some people are building solely on. But you might then imagine that these guys like Viking Line and the other dominant player, Tallink Silja, they know their value as places of commerce. So they will demand a lot out of you, like the typical at least 25% saving on high street price or a special edition or whatever. You have to prepare for it, but they can actually be really good places for you to hit. And then the monopolies and our weird relationship with them. So this is a happy queue of people queuing up for our first release of our Kyrö Rye whiskey. And you know, it's your only place to go to, but they can be really good customers. They're paying with government money, so they always pay on time, and they always pay. And once you get, let's say, a full listing in all, this is our Finnish monopoly Alko, a full listing will be 356 stores. So from 0 to 356 stores, pretty nice, but of course then you have to make it rotate. And that requires a lot that comes back to the marketing and the PR side. So how do you make your product known to your end consumer? And from there you have to go back to the culture. So what do we Nordic people appreciate? Let's say the Danes appreciate some things, the Finns some things, and the Swedes some things. And I'll be happy to talk about, for instance, the Finnish likes and dislikes if you come and visit our booth. But I think it's just key to remember that these have never been markets where, let's say, flashy vodka has really succeeded, even back in the 80s or 90s. And we're very particular about what we drink. And there's a lot of weird traditions where one of Finland's biggest spirits is a cognac that has been cut with neutral grain spirits. Norway's biggest spirits are generally aquavits and Norwegian cognacs, and Sweden with their aquavits and so on and so forth. So get to learn the culture, because it might look very, very different from your mainstays in other continental Europe or UK. But just to finish mine off, probably even ahead of time, but this is our team, and I wanted to bring this image in to highlight the Nordic oddity. This is when we were so proud to get our second set of copper stills. We were doing a photo shoot, and then we called the driver who was bringing the stills in that please actually drive straight into that forest and just leave the still there. We'll figure out later how to get it in. But it's images like this that have sort of made our reputation back in Finland. And this is my encouragement to you when you come to the Nordics. Be odd, be there with your own personalities and your own faces, and the Nordic people will in general appreciate that all around. So thank you.